Hey, and welcome back to After Effects Academy, Volume 1, The Fundamentals. And in this lesson, we're talking about shape layers. Shape layers are very, very powerful, as with all things in After Effects, and are unique to themselves. And that a lot of motion design these days is done with shape layers and shape layers only. So, what are shape layers? Well, let me show you. Turn off the transparency grid there. A couple different ways you can create shape layers. Actually, there's several ways you can create shape layers. One way is to go to Layer, New, Shape Layer. And there's nothing there because we need to draw something inside of this. You can see here's contents, but there's nothing inside of contents. So how do we draw? Well, we can use our pen tool, just like we used for masking. We can draw a line, and there's a line shape, and it's a line because it's using a stroke. So shape layers are typically created with fills and with strokes. So now inside of contents, we do have a shape 1, which is our line. It's made up of a path, which we have 2 points to our path. It has a stroke, which is pink, and a width of 10, and it has no fill because it's just a line. Now, within this same shape layer, I can create, let's say, like a rectangle. And how I do that is I could click, and I'm holding down Shift to make these lines straight, but except for that last line there. This could be, shape 2 could be, let's say, a box. And let's say we don't want a stroke on it. So I can click on stroke there, and I can say no stroke. Okay, but I do want it to be filled with a solid color. There's also fill with linear gradient and a radial gradient. So solid color is pretty standard. It's now filled with a solid color. I could now click on the color, and I could change this color to anything I wanted to change it to. So solid blue, it's great. So those are two simple ways to create, basic shapes. We could also have nothing here. No, we don't have to go to Layer, New, Shape Layer. We could just select a shape like a rectangle, and we can draw. And there's a gradient fill on a rectangle. And if I change it to a solid, there it is. I could add a stroke color here. Let's say it's pink. Great. And I could increase the stroke width, to something crazy like 120. I could reduce it down to something very thin, like 3 pixels, like that. Awesome. So that's another way you can create a shape layer. A additional way is I could just take that rectangle and I could just double click it. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a rectangle the exact same size as whatever my composition is. So if I go to composition settings, you can see here my composition is 1920 by 1080. Now, if I go into my rectangle and I open it up and I say, how big is this? It is set to a size of 1920 by 1080, same as my composition. Now, I could unconstrain the proportions here. We talked about this before. I could change this to 1080 to match this one. And now we have a perfect square. So I could constrain the proportions again. I could turn this down and make it a smaller square like that. There's different ways you can transform shape layers. You can open up transform rectangle properties and transform it this way. Same with position, things like that. You could also open up the transform properties for the actual layer and transform this way as well. So there's different options for how you control, animate a shape layer. Now you may wonder, why would you have a transform a rectangle and a transform layer property? Well, it could be, for example, let's say I also want to have a circle here. So I could double click the circle, and it's creating a kind of strange ellipse, which the layer is set to 84%. So if I scale the layer back up, you can see it fills the layer. The ellipse is now 1920 pixels wide by 1080 pixels high. So I'm going to change that to 1080. and constrain that. And let's say I want to move this layer over here and I want to transform the position or the scale like that. Now you can see here that it's scaling from this center point because this is the center point of the shape layer. If I move the position back to 0, 0, and then scale from here, it's scaling right from that center point of the shape layer. So shape layers have a lot of anchor points to them that you can really dive deep into and explore. So again, both of these shapes are on the same layer. So now I could go to layer transform properties and I could do things like move, and both these shape layers are going to move together because they sit on the same shape layer. I could scale them, same type of deal. We've also got different shapes up here. We've got a polygon tool. We've got a star tool, rounded rectangle tool. Just to show you like the star tool, if I click and drag this out here, you can see immediately the center point of the shape layer is right here in the middle, but I'm drawing a star wherever I deem that I want to draw that star. So you have to be aware that anchor point. Now it did pop up in here. I could open up the poly star. I could open up the path, and I could change it from 5 points, which you see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points right now. I could make it an 8-point star. I could make it a 3-point star, which is now a triangle. You can't go below 3 on here, but lots of different things you can do here. Okay, so I've got a box here, and you may say, okay, well, if you're drawing with the rectangle tool, which was used for masking, you're drawing with the pen tool, which is used for masking, if you're creating shapes with these, how do you mask? And that's a great question because it's really simple. All I have to do is select either a rectangle or a shape layer here, or I can select a pen tool, and I can go over here. Instead of shape layer, I'm going to select tool creates mask. And now it's not going to draw a shape layer. It's actually going to mask that shape layer. So if we go in here, we can see here's the mask. Right, that's something a lot of people get caught up on. So if I select the, let's say, ellipse tool, again, I can mask part of this shape layer if I need to do that. And there we go. Very simple. After Effects also has the ability to take vector layers created in programs like Adobe Illustrator and turn those into shape layers. So it's very powerful in that sense. So let's go ahead and bring in a few vector layers and I'll show what I'm talking about. A double click. And the first thing I'm going to do is bring in the hot pink line here. And I'm going to bring it down into my timeline. And there it is. It's a vector layer here. Not much going on. But all I have to do now is go up to Layer, Create Shapes from Vector Layer, and watch what happens. The original vector layer is turned off. And now a new shape layer that mimics the name is drawn on screen, and it matches it exactly. So just to show you it's a shape layer, I can now play with the stroke width. I could animate this in different ways. Very simple example, but this is what you can do. Let me show you another one here. I'll bring in a single shape. It's a snowman. Bring it down here. Turn this one off. And we can't see it because it's a black drawn snowman here. But if I select the layer, go to Layer, Create Shapes from Vector Layer, and boom, there we go. It turned off single shape. It now has the outlines. And if I open up contents, it's going to show here we've got several groups now. It decided to divide this image up into several groups. So let's take a look. This first, let's actually turn these off. Group 1 is its body. Group 2 is the nose. Group 3 is the smile. Group 4 is the left eye. And group 5 is the right eye. So now I could actually take different groups if I wanted to, and I could go into that group and say, okay, under transform, I actually want to go ahead and just move his eye. Maybe I want it to scale, like he's blinking or whatever. This is a great way to animate elements, vector elements inside of After Effects with shape layers. Let me show you one more example here. I'm going to bring in multiple shapes. So this vector layer has two Illustrator files within it. Bring it on the timeline here. And if I select this layer and go to Layer, Create Shapes from Vector Layer, now you can see everything's drawn here. And if I open this one up, it's got group 1 all the way through group 55. So this is all of these different elements in one single shape layer. So a lot of stuff going on here. So this is a great way to keep your comp, very simple. If I was only working with one shape layer, within that shape layer, I've got all these different groups that I can then animate all these different pieces. And you can see as I'm turning pieces off, you can see what they are. I could actually select all these. Group 28 is where it jumps over to the stereo here. Group 27 is still back over here. So I could take group 27 all the way to group 1, and I could actually put those in another group, right? I could say, okay, I want to add a new group. I'm gonna take that to the top here. And we could call this group camera. And I could go all the way through layer, 27? Yep. And just drag and drop those inside a camera. And there we go. So now I could create a second group here. And I could call this Jambox. And I could select group 55 through 28. Drag those in. And now we've got two groups. We've got the camera that we can animate the properties for by itself if we wanted to, or we could go in and animate all of the individual properties within it, scale, position, things like that. Very simple to control and animate. So let me find something here. Let's take the Jambox here. And group 35 looks like it is the black part of the speaker there. So let's say we wanted, you can set keyframes for the path properties here. So if we were to say there's where it starts, and I double click like I showed you in the previous, just like with masking, and I could say there, it shrinks back down. I'm going to copy Command C, Command V, and now we've got a moving speaker piece. Very simple example. You get the idea. Let me show you a great example of using something called the repeater inside of shape layers. It's very powerful. So let's create a new composition, and we'll call this repeater. And we'll go back to this hot pink line here. We'll drag it in there and we'll say layer, create shapes from vector layer. And I can delete the vector file now. Don't need it. Here's my line. Turn off the transparency grid. And let's see here. What do we got? We have got a group with a path, a stroke, and a transform property. So the first thing I want to do here is I want to actually animate this line. I want to make it go from the center point here. I want to make it come to the left, and I want to make it come to the right. So how would I do that? Well, it's really easy with shapes. I can select trim paths, and under trim paths, I can set keyframes because that's where we want to end. And I'll say, let's say that happens at 1 second. So we'll move the keyframes here, go back to the beginning of our timeline, and we'll bring this one in. It probably needs to be 50%. Yep, 50%. So it went from 100 to 50, which means this needs to go from 0 to 50. So that's 0. So we'll bring it up to 50. And we talked about easing keyframes. So I'm going to select all of these. I'm going to say keyframe assistant, easy ease. So you can see that it's just a nice little animation. It moves out. And then maybe at 2 seconds, maybe the animation will come back in and it'll just kind of repeat itself. So I'll select these two keyframes, Command C, Command V. And then I'm going to hit N on my keyboard to bring the end of my work area to where I want the animation to stop. And I'm going to hit 0. So very simple example of how to animate a shape layer using trim paths. Well, let's make this more interesting by using the repeater. And what does the repeater do? Well, if I select the group again, I say, hey, to this group, I want to add a repeater. There we go. So you just immediately see this line kind of pops out here because that's by default. Repeater always says, hey, we need to move on the X position 100 pixels. I don't know why they do that. I guess that's so you can see the repeating shapes. In my opinion, it should default to 0. So we'll zero it out. So there's nothing here. It doesn't look like there's anything here, but it says there's 3 copies, right? So let's just say we'll make it 6 copies. And on the y-axis, we'll just go ahead and bring them down here. And you can see what's going on. Just like that. And then I'm also going to go to transform the group. And I'm going to go to the position of the group. And I'm going to bring the y up so that we can kind of center up this composition. And I'm also going to hit comma on my keyboard to bring up my guides. And bring it right about right there. And now let's take a look at what it looks like. It's already more interesting, but there's a way, I think if we were to offset these lines, it'd be even more interesting, right? So let's try that. So how do we offset these lines to make them look even more interesting? Well, inside of shape layers, it's all about how you order things. So let's try and drag the repeater before the trim path and see what that does. Nothing right off the bat. If I open up trim paths and I change it from trim the multiple copies all at the same time to individually, look what it did there. So it's already, I mean, that's like a lot more interesting to me. I'm also going to increase the stroke to maybe 10. And one thing I don't like is this hard edge. And easy way to fix that is just to go in my stroke. And it defaults to a butt cap. I'm going to change it to a round cap. And there you go. Much more soft on the edges, easier to look at. Comma on my keyboard to turn off the grids and guides. So cool. So using one simple, we started with one vector shape, converted it to a line shape inside of After Effects, added a repeater and a trim path, and we've got something interesting going on.